And is it that when we want to create change and we do all the right things, sometimes it still just doesn't land with our team, right? Um, we often default to thinking that this is a communication problem. That if we had said better words or right words, or if we had said it with a softer tone, or if we'd said it more directly, we internalize this as something that is wrong or flawed or needs to be developed in our communication skills. And maybe there's some truth in that, but oftentimes it's actually a little bit deeper. We are looking more at trust issues where our team, it doesn't really matter what the words are. If they don't have a foundational level of trust with us, then whatever it is that we're delivering in their direction is not going to land in the right way for them, right? And so we end up trying to solve a problem that's the wrong the wrong problem to solve. And we want to actually invest our efforts and energy in fixing what will make a difference instead of things that won't make as much of a difference for that situation, right? Now, when I was looking at some research on this recently, McKinsey's State of Organizations 2026 report found that leadership teams that had clearly defined roles and they communicate progress through a change effort are 8 times more likely to succeed than those that don't, right? So the communication part is huge. And the clarity part is huge, and the rhythm with which we initiate and implement change is huge. It's not so much the strength of the why for the person on your team. Why is important, and what motivates each of us individually on a team and as a leader is very important. But when we're specifically talking about change management and getting people on board, every person's why is going to be unique and is going to be different. What we need is cohesiveness in that trust on the team so that each person can anchor their why into that change and effectively and productively make this happen, right? So that's what's going to separate, our efforts that stick long term versus the ones that we are just trying to kind of throw spaghetti at the wall and see what happens and what sticks, right? And this lines up with what I see constantly in the leaders that I'm working with, in the executives that I'm working with. They nail the announcement, right? Like we have thoughtfully and carefully and intentionally planned out what the change is. And then there's a step back. There's a going silent. There's a time of just like assuming that everyone gets it, like we talked about yesterday, right? There's no, here's what we're doing, here's the next step, here's my role in this. This is what I'm envisioning is your role in this, and here's where we're going to end up, right? We hit the beginning, the middle, and the end, and can lay out that entire path instead of it just like, here's what we're doing, and then moving on, right? That middle silence there is where the trust starts to break down in that process when we're moving on to something new, right? And I want you to think about what that would be like for you if you were building a house and you have a picture of what the final house is going to look like, but someone starts tearing out walls and they're like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to make this change, and you have no idea, is there rot behind the wall? Is the electrical work going to have to be redone? How old is the water heater? Are there rats living in the basement? Like, there's so much in that middle piece that if we go silent during that, how are we going to trust the process? How are we going to trust as this is moving along that it's going correctly when there's so much in the middle and so much gap and gray area that needs to be addressed? It needs to be spoken about. And that's the leader's role. If you are having a team that's attempting to follow you, it's not their job to initiate those conversations. It's not their job to bring that to the table. Hopefully, they do have a line of communication with you, but it's literally your job. It's literally your role to facilitate that and to bridge that gap for them, right? And how people trust you is going to show up in how you're leading them through that messy middle, right? I learned this the hard way, leading teams through changes that I didn't choose. Really funny, and this is something that we don't talk about enough. There were things that I had to implement for my team that I disagreed with. I did not like it. I thought it was dumb. It was not a decision that I wanted to make. Um, I was not bought in, right? As their leader, I was not bought in. And I had staff that yelled, cussed, did not like me, completely broke their trust, didn't trust me beyond that point to they didn't think I had their best interest at heart. Right. And there were a couple, I hate to admit this, but it's just the truth. There were a couple of professional relationships that completely disintegrated as I implemented changes that I had no control over. And I just wanted to scream through the mountaintops and say, like, I don't want this either. And I totally know how you feel. But in that moment, I had to remain steady and strong and grounded in something that was coming down the pipeline, whether we wanted it or not. And I failed as a leader in that time to better envision that messy middle. I failed to communicate effectively in what needed to happen, what my role was, what their role was, how I was going to partner with them through that change. All I talked about was that endpoint. All I talked about was that pretty house. I feel like I'm making a personal apology right now, and maybe God will make sure that the people that this happened to can see this video. We'll cross our fingers that God brings it in front of their path because they'll know. And all I was doing as a leader was saying, look at this pretty end point, trying to convince myself at the same time that I was trying to talk to them and remain professional in that moment, in that journey, in that experience. And I did not serve them well. I did not serve myself well. I didn't communicate effectively to them. And I really damaged some work relationships because I had not been trained better how to do this. I did not have the skill set to effectively walk them through this change, and it damaged my professional relationships. And so I'm hoping that on the other side of this coin, more than a decade later, working with so many clients and so many organizations, that we've learned a better way to do this. I've learned a better way to do this. And it's by not avoiding the mess, not avoiding the gray area, not avoiding the process, not avoiding the hard conversations, and getting into the thick of it, and not just communicating what's going to happen and what the end point looks like, but communicating that messy middle. That's the goal. That's where we can effectively create change and hold space and do it well for our teams and for ourselves at the same time, right? And so I know it's not comfortable. I know it feels really different. I know a lot of us want to avoid it entirely. But if we're going to do this well, if we're going to preserve trust on our team and with our coworkers, then we have to learn how to do this, and we have to learn how to be vulnerable enough to have these conversations. Now, I'm not saying overshare. I'm not saying be inappropriate. I'm not being like, let's go grab a drink and complain about work. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying we need to look the messy middle in the eyes and actually have conversations around it, right? So, anytime that you are directing change, I would encourage you to have a 24 or 48-hour check in. um, Touch base with people, say what questions have come up, right? What did you think about when you laid your head on the bed last night? Because if they're anything like me, they're going to start like overthinking. And let's be honest, when we're overthinking worst case scenario stuff. We're not thinking best case scenario. We're losing sleep over worst case scenario stuff. And so, what is that? Have that discussion with the team. What came up with you? What questions do you have? Did you think of any possible solutions? Collaborate with your team instead of isolating them, and allow them to give you ideas and creative solutions that maybe even you had not yet thought of, right? It doesn't have to be a full meeting or a deep dive, but a little 5-minute check in individually with each person and get their honest feedback. You will not only create trust, and you will not only lay a good solid foundation before you go into the messy middle of change, but you will also probably get some really good ideas. And if you have someone that's going to be very vulnerable and open and say, I'm worried about this, I'm afraid about this, I thought, what if this doesn't work? They're not the only ones thinking about it. And as a leader, that gives you a lot of data to be able to have informed conversations with your team and with your staff. It changes the game, and it makes this process so much more smooth when you have to do any kind of change in the organization, right? They don't need a better explanation. They need your trust and they need you there with them, right? Okay. So, if you need help navigating any kind of change or anything like that, I would love to chat with you. Shoot me an email, info@amycapello.com. Go to my website. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about why is not enough all the time. It's important and it's huge, but it's not always enough. And sometimes we have to affect change that is not up for debate, regardless of whether or not it anchors into a person's life. Okay, I will talk to you later. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.